Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Mindfully Curious podcast. My name is Steph, and I have the pleasure and honor of being the host for this space. Today's episode, Birthing Your Vibe. We are going to be talking to our friend Wyatt, aka at Just Like You Imagined. If you guys are into spicy beats, I highly recommend that you go check out his Spotify ASAP, linked in show notes, of course. And if you're like, WTF is spicy beats, well, I also think you should check him out because spicy beats save lives. So Wyatt is a musician and also expresses his creativity through video making and creating. He has a business where that is what he does professionally, and he also coaches people on how to create better videos. His focus when working with clients is to teach them to make work that matters. I have attended one of his workshops and I found it super inspiring, the way he was talking about approaching his work and how that would benefit if I apply that to my work. So I'm really excited to share his journey with you. We really got deep into the process of making his latest album, his latest and his debut album, actually, Crown. And we talk about inspiration for this project and how he kind of got inspired by life to keep saying yes to creativity and developing multiple creative skills, like making music, like making videos, and how all of those creativity skills apply to a bigger, like a macro view of our life, or of our human lives. Wyatt talks about finding your path through your work. So knowing that this is what you are so passionate about doing, that you're going to do this out of love, perhaps not out of money. And then eventually that kind of leads to, hey, now I got money because I just do this as a labor of love. Kind of like this podcast is for me. I honestly do it because I love that I get to ask questions and get pretty thoughtful answers. I love that so much, and this is only possible because of you, the listeners. So thank you so much for being here. I love you. I appreciate you. And if you connect with any of the content or whatever, please don't forget to reach out to our guests. All the information linked in show notes. You know where to find me, at Rabbit Legion. And again, all the links that we speak about today should be under show notes. Love you. So much for being here tonight. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for being such a great supporter and just human to interact with in general. And I love it and I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Compliment received, and I am so hyped for creativity. So thank you for coming on today to chop it up about the creative project that you most recently birthed into this world, which is called Crown. So you make EDM music by the name Just Like You Imagined.
That is correct. That's me. Birthing is an adequate term for that. I would say, as much as, a pregnant woman probably resists the process, I too resisted it for a very long time. But it all came around when it was supposed to, and it ended up being so beautiful and such a perfect experience. And very quickly I'm pregnant again. So we'll see when that one comes out. I'm hoping sometime in the spring. That's really my intention, but there's a lot of things to learn and do. And I already put out a new song today because I don't have a record label or really like, thousands and thousands of people listening to my stuff yet. So it's like I can really for like enjoy this time and do whatever I want. So I was like, great, I released an album last week. Let's just put out another song. Let's just keep the train going. So that'll be on Spotify and everything and all the major platforms
I
pretty
love
soon.
that, dude.
Yeah.
And it's so cool that you just said, hey, I just went ahead and did it because I don't have anybody regulating me. And I even feel like now that really, even in the industry, has changed, aka thank you, Kanye West. Because I feel like after he was like, I'm going to drop this album, and then he did it for like months and years. And then he dropped an album with like 7 songs. And, he did so many things that I feel like now it's like, yo, Kanye even ran for president. Like artists, we really do have the license to do whatever we want because that's really what makes us an artist. And by us, I mean like any human, because I believe that all humans are creative. And if you're
Mm-hmm.
having the thought right now that you're not creative, you're the maker of that thought, therefore you are creative. Welcome to the club. So,
Mm-hmm.
before we really dig into the creative process for this project, would you mind kind of catching us up with like with your life throughout your journey? Like how did you get to be who you are today and do what you do today?
Um, well, as far as I know, we're booked for this for, around an hour, a little more. So we do not have time for the entire story. But essentially, if I could sum it up pretty quickly and as powerfully and as like relatably as possible. Um, okay, I can weave all the threads in one thing. So essentially, I've always been very creative and imaginative ever since I was born, or like I guess my consciousness started forming, as a toddler, 3, 4 years old, and have always been interested in music, always been interested in video production, which is what I do for a living, and all of those things were always like whispering to me as this portal to other worlds. And that everyone feels that way, like there's a reason why kids get glued to a TV watching some Disney movie or whatever. It's because it's transporting them somewhere else. And we essentially had this entertainment system and this is in the 90s, so an entertainment system was like 25 different things from, some of them were 10 years old, some of them were new, like it was this cobbled together thing. But the TV, our VHS collection, the stereo and the CD collection, that was like my altar as a kid. And so then I started getting really tall, and I'm almost 7 feet tall. And most people don't know that through, Instagram and stuff. They're like, well, he's tall, but he's not that tall. But so I started growing and started having this interest in sports. And so there became this dichotomy of like this masculine, very material pursuit of playing sports, and then this more feminine, and there's masculine and feminine in both of them, but primarily, feminine creative ventures. And I never really understood how to balance those things. So throughout my whole life, there was this dance between those two areas where at times it was like, I don't want anything to do with sports. And then other times where I'd kind of shelved, music and videos and stuff and those creative ventures. And so that dance persisted throughout high school and college until finally, I was playing Division I basketball and was on track to play professionally, whether that was in the NBA or Europe. That was kind of up in the air. But, my coaches and trainers and stuff were like, dude, you really got this. Like you could make it happen. And I knew in my heart, I was like, this isn't for me. This isn't what I'm really here to do. And, and I was producing music in my dorm room and doing all this stuff. And, in high school, I was in a band, and all I wanted to do was play the drums in that band. And, like always my coach was like, hey, this is your job. You gotta do the thing. So I was always being pulled back into basketball, always being pulled back into like showing up as a normal person in society, because they were like, making beats on your laptop's not going to pay the bills. And I'm like, watch, bitch, watch. It's about to happen. So, that was the through line throughout everything, which I didn't realize until this year. And backing up a step, thank you for coming on this very windy journey with me.
It's a good
Uh,
one.
yeah, the my sophomore year of college, or actually at the end of my freshman year, I had my first mushroom experience, and I realized like while there were, to me, my universe, like shattering downloads about, the ego and consciousness and what we even are. And it was this full, like, reality dissolving experience. And for those of you that have done mushrooms before or haven't, it was somewhere in the range of 5 to 6 grams for my first dose, because we all ate 3.5, and most of my friends didn't finish them. And I was like, great, I'm going to finish the ones that you're not eating. So it was a solid amount for that first experience. And that was while I was playing basketball in college. And I was torn. I was like, man, this experience is showing me that I want to go do something else with my life. And yet everything else in the ordinary world is telling me to play basketball. And I was like, you know what? I'm finished. I'm done. I'm not going to do it. And so I left that cabin that my friends and I were at. It was this, beautiful spring break experience where most of us, I think, all except for one, were having our first psychedelic experience together. And it was a beautiful thing. And I left that feeling very inspired with life and feeling like broken wide open. Like I was looking, and this is, I was 19 and looking my like straight white bro male friends in the eyes and being like, dude, I fucking love you. They were like, yo, what's what's happening right now? Now that's normal for all of my friends to like kiss each other on the cheeks and have really deep hugs and like really, soften around each other. And I was in this world of like all, super uptight, like masculine, like, don't fucking touch me, bro. Like, you know how this, you don't want to go there, like that kind of thing. And so I was just completely broken open by this. And then somehow that inspiration between spring break and going back to college, where I was so inspired to leave basketball, somehow that got twisted in my mind based on outside voices and probably a lot of fear to funnel that inspiration into basketball. So I got like completely twisted up, and I don't even know how it happened. But then almost immediately I got sick. I got like really, really sick, and it kind of came and went in these weird waves for a while until about 6 or 7 months later, it just completely destroyed me, like around my 20th birthday, which is in October. And this was 6 years ago, 6+ years ago now at this point. And I ended up in the hospital and ended up like losing all of my progress with basketball in school and, my friendships. Like I completely isolated myself, and it was this really, horrifying experience. And I share that because that was the thing that made me go, okay, something inside me is like screaming for me to do something different. And it's taken the last 6 years to figure out, what that thing was. And finding, real service in the world. And I find that my music is of service to people. And I find that the new things that I'm doing with video production and teaching people how to create videos, all of those things are really coming to fruition as a way that I can really help not only myself, but the world and the people around me have you ever heard the difference between dharma and karma?
I have. Isn't it like dharma is like what you love, and karma kind of comes out of like not the bad things, but more like the bad vibes that you put out?
So kind of, yeah, like that's a decent like summary of it. So, and there's so many different interpretations too. So like what I'm about to say is completely different in a lot of
Okay.
ways to what other people will say. But the way I look at it in a really good analogy is that karma is like coins. It's like pennies and nickels and, maybe dollars and, 20s and 50s and stuff. Like it's small amounts of money,
Trump
right?
change.
Yeah, it's chump change. Even if it's $100 bill, it's like on the grand scale of money, that's really not that much. And so um, with karma, it's a lot of like, it's like a ratio of exchange. It's like you put good out into the world, like you give some of your money, your like karmic debt out into the world, and then you get some back, and it's can be good or bad, and it's this plus and minus exchange in a lot of ways, and it's very like tedious, and the way of living is kind of like life is always happening to you. It's always this like this victimhood thing of like, why am I going through this? And it's like, well,
It's
you
like
did.
industrial capitalism.
Yeah, it's like you did this thing, and then you have this result, and it can be good or bad, and it's kind of like ticky tack, and it's it can be like a very tedious process to live that way, and it can also be very painful because you're focused on one bad deed equals this, and then one good deed equals that, and you're kind of living your life on these little exchanges. And then dharma is like your deep calling in the world, and that's like the path in life that you were born to walk. It's the dance that God or your soul or whatever part you identify with is asking you to dance. It's like that thing that you're supposed to do, and you can kind of feel when you get close to it. It's like you start to experience life differently, like things start coming into shape in this really interesting way. And that I equate dharma to gold or like diamonds. Like it's so valuable, and it completely transmutes and dissolves so many things. And there's this interesting thing that happens to a lot of people, and it just happened to me recently over the last couple months, where you start to realize when you're on this like healing and self exploration path, and you're going into your wounds and different your trauma and trying to heal these very specific things, that's in a lot of ways in the dance of karma. And that's in the dance of like I had this realization a couple months ago where I thought, how long am I supposed to do this? Like how long am I supposed to, or how many ceremonies am I supposed to do? How many transformative experiences am I going to have before I get it? Like before I like feel okay, if that makes
What
sense.
was the answer?
The answer is that is essentially an endless loop. Like you will get stuck there forever trying to heal these individual things. And while it's useful at times, like if something big comes up, like with your partner or family member or close friend, if something comes up and you're like, wow, this is making me feel like I'm an 8-year-old again. It's like there's a reason that's happening, and you address it in the moment. But the thing that generally dissolves all of that is like walking your path in life. And then it just becomes part of what you're doing. So if you're focused on this guide star and you're going towards this really deep calling, this higher calling for yourself, and things come up, it's just part, it's like, it's no longer this thing that makes you recoil and you have to gather all of your strength to defeat it. It's like, oh, this is just part of the dance now. And so your karmic debt, essentially, like the weight that you're born with, that you're here to repay through your actions and through the things that you heal and the people you interact with, and like the deeds, good or bad, that you do, when you really live your path, you're paying that debt instead of with pennies and ones and fives and stuff like that. You're paying it with like bars of gold and saying, here you go. And it's like, it's a much more fulfilling path to walk. And I don't remember exactly how I got on that tangent, but essentially that's where I've found myself recently, is learning. I haven't figured it out 100%, but learning how to do the dance and allow, my life to really be like a flow, a very fulfilling thing. And I find that music is a massive part of that. And so, yeah, so essentially my whole life has been a dance between responsibility and creativity. And now I'm learning to combine those things and make a fulfilling and like, and healing essentially life out of that. So,
And kind of in a way, by healing life, you kind of also heal more your relationship to creativity, because, I mean, at least to me, it kind of sounds like a philosophy that I have, which is that everything in life is a cycle. Like our cells are always like destroying themselves and making themselves anew. And obviously that process does slow down as we age, but if you're still alive, like that's it, still happening. So just like you said, you know, you're going to keep going through these like cycles of like doing different things and encountering different situations where you're going to learn, because I really do think that Joseph Campbell had it right with the hero's journey. All the stories kind of follow like that same path. Maybe not all 15 steps or whatever, but it's kind of something that keeps happening over and over. You have a mission and then you're like, nah, I'm not gonna do that, which, you know, it sounds like it happened to you, and it definitely happened to me in my journey many times, because apparently I really needed a lot of learning.
I've been that's really where that realization came from, of like, how many times am I going to get beaten over the head with the same stick? It's like, it's really fascinating. And so I was trying to approach it as, you know, these little tiny moments of, you know, like, okay, well, I figured that thing out. Cool. So, and instead of going like, oh yeah, it's beating me over the head to look in a certain direction until I find the thing, you know? And so, yeah, I have experienced that hero's journey arc many times, and it's very very applicable in a lot of ways. And, you know, repeating things, I really like the analogy of the spiral, that it's not, because a cycle in a lot of ways implies that you're at the same level sometimes, like that, if you look at it that way. But a spiral, it's like you're continuing to ascend and develop, but, you know, at each point on the spiral, at each level, you might hit the same things, but just with, you know, more knowledge and more understanding, more experience. And, you know, you might have a better foundation the next time you reach it, because you watch a lot of people, myself included, experience the same things like over and over and over and over, and they never get it. And I think that the thing that dissolves all of that is really finding that thing that's like non-negotiable in your life. It's the thing you're going to do every day if you could. And so, yeah, that's really how I ended up making music, was being like, oh wow, I'm being asked to create something beautiful that inspires people, that anybody at any time can listen to. And I think that's the cool difference between, while I'm passionate about making videos, it's not the same. And I know it doesn't have the same like core kind of thing, like that timelessness, because videos, like most people watch them once and they might watch the first minute of them really, but like, you can return to a song at any time. It can be on your phone or your laptop or whatever forever. It could be a physical CD. Like, you can always go back to that, and people attach emotions to sounds and, you know, events, and it can bring back memories, and it's so powerful. And so knowing that here and there already I'm beginning to create those moments, not only for myself but for other people, like, I can tell I'm really like just starting to scratch the surface. Like, this monster that's coming out right now is like, it's just a little baby hatchling at this point, and it's really cool to be at the beginning of that.
I feel like creativity and ideas are like bacteria. Like you start with one and then that splits to two, and then those like turn into whatever. I'm really bad at math, but what I mean is like, it's not this like linear growth, it's this exponential growth. And the more you practice it, like sometimes I remember you saying like, hey, yeah, I just birthed this project and I'm about to birth a new one. And I feel like the more you do it, the more you're like, oh, I'm like in the process of making one right now, but I need to have like 5 notebooks to write my 10,000 ideas, because it just kind of there's like cockroaches. Like if there's one, you know, they just multiply so quickly. It can get out of hand. So that being said, what was the process like for you making a whole EP and just kind of taking this, and I mean, I want to say seriously, not like you weren't taking it seriously before, but I feel like this approach of making an album requires a lot of planning, commitment, and resources.
Yeah. Well, I think primarily the resources were all internal. The um, overall cost so far hasn't been like too much, especially like, well, I guess that's not important, but the so for you might not know this, but I just started doing this in April of 2020. So it was a thing that kind of emerged in that quarantine phase where things were really weird for a little bit, and before we started to figure out like, okay, there's a ton of fucking going on, like this is not what we think it is. But that moment where we were like, yes, mommy and daddy government, please tell me what's going on, I don't know. And trying to figure out what's happening and just staying in the house and going out for our daily mandated Whole Foods break, our government mandated Whole Foods venture. And so, yeah, I was living with two of my best friends, and then my fiance, or now fiance, she came to visit. She's from Canada. And so it was basically just the four of us in our house. And we were stuck there, and a lot of crazy shit came up, and it was like a very, very transformative but very scary experience. And a lot of the way that I showed up in relationship, a lot of like immaturity and kind of old patterns that I hadn't recognized or really understood were coming up. And I was like, oh my God, I need something to get away from this. Like I don't know what it was. So I started building puzzles all the time. And I was focusing on puzzles for hours a day. It was so wild. And I never gave a shit about puzzles. And then I ran out of puzzles, and I didn't really want to buy more because it felt ridiculous. And everyone was like, yo, dude, you're spending like so much time building puzzles. Are you okay? And I was clearly hiding from something.
So you developed a puzzle addiction during COVID. Gotcha.
Exactly. And then eventually that transformed into opening up an old music program that I had for recording podcasts, and just making like these weird songs, because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't really understand how to use the program, but just based on what I had, I would kind of make these things happen. And just with the stock samples and like the shitty instruments, it's a program called Logic, and like Apple's bass instruments are notoriously terrible. Like most of the music programs, the stock instruments and stuff aren't that great. But I was just making these things, and I would play them for everyone, and they'd be like, okay, like there's something here. It's weird. It's like, I mean, it's all over the place, but there's something here. And then my friend said, what is, like, I started expressing how much I loved making music, and I was like, wow, I forgot how important this was to me. This is really cool. I think I want to like start releasing things. And he said, what's the best program that all of the pros use, like all the best producers? What's the thing that they use? And I was like, Ableton. And he said, I suggest you buy that right now and start and just dive into it. And I was like, oh no, I can't switch programs. I'm just kind of starting to figure this thing out. And that almost derailed everything, was buying that. Like the first couple days working on it, I was like, I fucking hate this program. I don't, like, nothing works the way I want it to work. And all the controls were different, and it was just this really interesting and chaotic learning experience. And then within about a month, I had a real song that I wanted to release, and I was like, wow, this is fucking nuts. Like, I can't believe
and that was on Ableton.
Yeah, that was on Ableton. And I made something. It's on Spotify. It's called Differences, and that was the first song I made. And I finished it in like early to mid May. And so it was like a month and a half or so, like about a month after getting Ableton and starting to take it seriously, that I submitted a song to be released, and it came out in June of 2020. And so that was kind of the first, first little bit. And I remember putting it up on Instagram and stuff, and I just got this flood of people that were like, holy shit, like this isn't really my jam, it's really weird electronic music. And then some people that were like, dude, this is fucking crazy, I love this song. And people that I didn't expect were reaching out, and they were like, you did this is crazy. And so from that point, everything just exploded. So really the process of making the album started then. We're like, I took the dive and put the first thing out, and it got, onto the official platforms. And then people were like, damn, I need to hear more of this. And so I started releasing things here and there. And I made a song called Sex, Love, Abundance in, I think, July. And that was the first like, oh, there's really, really, really something here kind of moment, because that got a lot of attention and people were really excited about that. And the weirdest feedback, because my name is Just Like You Imagined as an artist, people were reaching out and saying, dude, I've been listening to this song for like 3 weeks and I just found out that it was you today. Like I've been playing it all day, every day. I love this song so much. And I just found out that it was you. And I was like, dope. Like that's really cool. And so yeah, the like loop of, it's a thing, like music is a thing that I know that if no one cared, I would continue to still do it. But having that feedback loop of like, okay, this works, like people respond well to this. And then eventually starting to, put on, and you attended one of our dances where, creating a mix that's supposed to take people on a journey and having, people really feel it. And then also playing it in different contexts with people, if we're all hanging out and someone, like a bunch of friends were all together and we were doing MDMA together, and someone was like, play one of your songs, play the song, we want to hear it.
What
and
a
we
trip.
did. Yeah. And then watching everybody who's like, they're all melting together on the couch, and everyone's eyes are super wide, go like, oh my God. And like the whole room's energy shifts and everyone starts like vibing together to this song. Those moments were like the moments that really kind of let me know, like, okay, this is how this affects people, this is how powerful it can be. And yeah, so like, I mean, I've made hundreds of songs throughout that time, like so much. It's kind of wild, like how many have come out and how many fail, how many I do absolutely nothing with, or like I hit a point where I'm like, I've ruined this thing, there's no point in even saving it. And then also learning how to do it like properly. Even on the album, there's songs that are like, from a production perspective, they're just wrong, which is kind of funny, like to put out an official release just knowing that it's not professional, like it's to the best of my ability and the best that I could do. But in terms of like, the way a producer or a sound engineer with 10 years of experience would look at it, there's so many mistakes. And I think it makes it cool, like it's kind of raw, and it's not this frequency and level perfection, and that everything is like this cohesive piece. It's very experimental for me in a lot of ways. And I'm just starting to, like, I mean, every song I'm figuring out more and more of how to shape it and make it tighter and have all the frequencies fit together perfectly. So it's a process that I'm sure is going to continue to unfold as long as I do it, getting better and better and learning how to even start a project in the first place, which is a really interesting thing, like how to lay the foundation so that every piece that you put in place fits together better. And there's all these different methods you can learn with how the instruments are even placed and why you choose each thing. Because before it was like, oh, this sounds dope, that's going in there. And then there's actually a method that you can use to fill up different spaces in the frequency bands and make it more make it just feel better to your ears. And
okay, so I definitely want to make sure that we note this, because you just dropped like a huge golden nugget of wisdom there, which is basically a lot of us wait until we know everything or until we know like industry standards and all this
Mm-hmm.
stuff to put our work out there, even though we don't need to, we don't have
Yep.
to. And here's a beautiful example, you know, it's like you just do it, and to an untrained ear, which honestly is most of us, because really, when you think about it, how many producers do you think there are out there? Or how many
Mm-hmm.
people have that knowledge, that like super technical ability to just know, like, oh, this isn't like industry standards? It's
Yeah.
not that many. And to
Mm-hmm.
most of us, you know, like you were saying, you were so blessed to have the feedback of your friends and other people
Mm-hmm.
that told you like, hey, no, like this, you can vibe to this. Because I
Yeah.
really do feel like emoting and expressing yourself is such an important part of life, because if you don't express and you don't emote, how are other people gonna know what your vibe is?
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's so like well put. Um the kind of like, I have a very rebellious teenager still living inside me, you know, like a very much like, you know, fuck you mom and dad, and fuck you government, and fuck you power structures, you know, that kind of thing. And that part of me was like, you know what, music is energy at the end of the day, so fuck you. Like, my energy, maybe it's unfinished and it's all over the place and it doesn't really make sense, but I know that people can vibe to it, and that's really the important thing. It's like, can you move to this and can you enjoy it? Yes, okay, then it's a song. And like, I had this chip on my shoulder, and then somewhere in October, when it came time to, so I released the song Take Your Power Back on SoundCloud, and I sent it to Aubrey and Wim, who I'm close with. Aubrey, I work with him, and he sent it to Wim Hof, and like, it was this whole thing of like, oh no, it's real. Like, people, like, I made something featuring people that people know, and like, you know, it's going to be, you know, a bigger deal. And then there was a Halloween party at Aubrey's house, and I had just sent it to him like a day or two before that, and he wouldn't stop playing it. He was so excited about it, and he was like, all right, everybody get in here, we have to listen to the song again. And we would play the song, and it was like this whole party of people vibing to this song. And it was so cool to feel that, because it was like it was the biggest atmosphere that it had been played in, and like the way people were moving. And I have a video of it, and it was so cool. And it happened like 4 or 5 times. Like, he just kept playing it. And
What a gift, dude, for you to be
yeah,
able to receive that. And also, I
yeah,
feel like you also gave other people a gift, because I don't know if, you know, either one of them were like planning on being featured on an EDM song. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying?
No, he wasn't. It was we were in Sedona for an event together, and Aubrey was playing a clip from his most recent podcast with Wim Hof, and he was he was like, dude, you should put this in one of your songs, because he had heard a couple of them before, and he was, you know, and Wim screaming, and it's the clip that ended up in the thing. And I remembered that the podcast producer that does the audio and video for Aubrey's podcast had sent me this video of Aubrey playing the flute a while ago and said, you should sample this. And I heard it and was like, yeah, this is dope. But then I kind of forgot about it. Like, it just, the connection wasn't there. And then when Aubrey was holding up his phone playing the Wim Hof thing, I was like, oh, and all the pieces came together. And as soon as I got home from Sedona, I started working on it. And that was it. I mean, it came out in like 2 days. Like, it was this very fast process, like just this thing that was coming out. And yeah, so he had no idea it was happening until I literally just texted it to him, and he was like, what the fuck? What is this? This is so dope. And
That
so yeah,
story hella gave me a visual of like you guys being flowers. The muse is like a little bee, just like visiting like
yeah,
each one of them. And then it's like,
yeah.
here we have the honey that y'all made is this song. That's so dope.
Yeah, yeah, it's really cool. And those are my favorite things that have this like kind of moment, and then it, you know, just comes out, and it's the thing that's supposed to come out. And I find myself trying to do certain things here and there, and it's almost like trying is missing the point, because it's the songs that matter to me and that stick around are the ones that were these like effortless flows of inspiration where everything just kind of like makes sense, and it carries a different resonance with it. And so, you know, that so that party and having and talking about it then, where I knew that I was like more and more getting onto something, and that it was going to reach a lot of people, and that, you know, my music could shift, you know, the energy in the room. And people were like, what are you going to do? When are you going to release that? And I just made it up on the spot. I was like, oh, I'm going to send it to a mastering engineer and get it like, you know, treated and like taken care of professionally. And I'm going to put it out as soon as possible. And I just like bullshitted, like just said it like there, and was like, oh, okay, cool. So
now you have to do it.
Yeah. And at first it was supposed to be, you know, just an EP, like 4 or 5 songs. And I had this kind of story arc planned with the EP, and a couple more songs started coming out of the woodwork. And then I resisted it. Like I resisted it for so long. And
that fucking resistance, it always shows up.
100%. And just kept putting it off, and kept making, you know, excuses for it. And I even like, I was so blind to it that I almost blew up my entire life trying to avoid putting an album out. Like I almost broke up with my fiance and like moved out of my house and became a Christian. Like it was this whole rabbit hole that like it would take another podcast to talk about this entire rabbit hole. But like, I kind of just lost myself for a little bit and was like very very confused and didn't understand what was going on. And then my same friend that told me to buy Ableton was like, it sounds like you have a course to launch and an album to finish, and I'm working on a documentary as well right now, and a documentary to complete, and you would rather blow your entire life up than face the resistance of those things. And I was like, oh my God, that's so wild. And then just one step at a time have been completing those things and, you know, making it happen. And it's just such a wild thing how, you know, how afraid we are of finality. And like, because when you complete something, it like you're giving birth to it and it dies at the same time. You can't like touch it anymore. There's no more, you can't make it any more perfect than it already is. And so I had a track list, and I planned on it being an EP, and it was going to be 6 songs. And then I was like, you know what? This one's actually pretty good. I'm going to dive back into it and see what happens. And then I ended up adding an entire new section and adding like 2 minutes to the song at the end. And it's now, I think, my favorite song on the album. It's called Love Language. And that was something I produced back in June or July and had kind of forgotten. And then I just dove back in and started reshaping some things and, you know, putting a little bit more polish on it. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to see what happens if I make another, you know, pause and build up and put another drop on the end. And was like, holy shit, this is one of my favorite things that I've ever made. And like the energy in it is so like, it has so much like movement and like passion in it. And I thought, okay, well then that has to go on the album. So, or that has to go on the EP. So I was still calling it an EP at that time. And I sent those 7 songs to this mastering engineer that I found online. And I was like, I need these real fast. I need to release this on the 22nd. And I sent them to him on New Year's Eve. And that was my pre-New Year's resolution, that I was going to send everything out. And so the next day I wake up on New Year's Day and I'm like, okay, cool. So I did it, I finished it, and I'm going to start the next album right now. And I made this song I started messing around with this synthesizer, and then all of a sudden I was like, holy shit, this is a full song happening right now. And The Garden, which is the intro to the album, just like fully materialized almost entirely in that day.
Dude, I love that song, but I mainly love, I mean, obviously the beats are super spicy, which is like your trademark, and that's awesome. But I love the story on that one. Like,
Hmm.
how did you come up with like that story? Like,
Yeah, yeah. So that's I have a program that you can type words into, and this robot voice will talk them back to you. And
I need
so
this.
it's called Speak Line, I want to say. It's a Mac. You can get it on the Apple Store, I think. And it the only voice that I liked was the Scottish woman. It was a there's like a bunch of different languages you can choose from, and the one that had a Scottish accent was the one that I liked, and I used her voice in Coronation as well, and it made me realize like she's narrating and she seems to be some sort of like deity, and some sort of like otherworldly spirit at least. And I started thinking of her as like maybe she's like the goddess of the simulation. So the kind of duality that I'm playing with in my music is like technology and nature. So it's kind of like the simulation or consciousness in a way, if that makes sense. And so this idea came to me that I was going to have two characters. I was going to have two female characters that would be in my music, and one would be the like simulation goddess who is named Alma, and that's the voice in the garden and Coronation. And she's loving, but she's also kind of chaotic, and like she's indifferent in a lot of ways, if that makes sense.
Did you
Because
know that alma in Spanish means soul?
yes, I did,
Okay.
and I figured that out after the fact, and I thought that was
What?
yeah, I thought that was really interesting. And yeah, I Googled it. I was like, why is the name Alma coming to me? And then I was like, oh shit. And then
Dude, that's
yeah,
awesome.
so it's pretty cool. And so she's like indifferent if she's part. So say we are in, some sort of like computer technological simulation, and that's the um basis, like that's the story of the garden, then she would essentially be your guide. But if she knows that you're in a simulation and she's helping you through this, she's not going to really care whether or not you come back again. If you like, and that's based on the idea that if you don't learn the lessons that you're here to learn in your life, you get sucked back in and you don't, graduate to the next level or, get out entirely. And I'm not certain that there's a point in getting out entirely. Like we're here, so we've probably been here many times and we might come back an infinite number of times after this. I really don't know. But she has this kind of nefarious, like mischievous side to her too, which is in the part where she's like, you'll be back around again soon. And like her voice gets all evil. And um, there's going to be a song on the second album where it's a continuation of the garden and Coronation, and it's about how hard it is to be alive. And she's like, not so easy, is it? And like says, it's okay, you don't have to do what you're here to do, you can be mine forever. And then it like does another, you know terrifying dissolve where her voice gets all distorted and the song gets really dark all of a sudden. And yeah, so those are fun for me. And then the idea of her more natural, like more divine, more consciousness oriented counterpart is Sophia. And that is like the divine spark or like the divine mother. And I haven't incorporated her into any songs, but I want a real human to voice that one. And she will be kind of a benevolent guide, like a very loving soul whisper. So I'm planting the seeds right now to have this, back and forth between the two of them throughout my future work. And so I think that that's pretty cool. But anyway, I sent the garden to the mastering engineer after I had already submitted the album and didn't realize that it was an album until I did that. And I was like, wait a minute, this is 8 songs. Like that feels like a lot for an EP that's normally, 4 or 5 songs, and there's 8 here, and it's, 30 some minutes long. and I looked up what the regulation of an album
The
was,
regulation.
yeah, like what was considered the difference between an EP and an album. And it turns out that anything above 25 minutes in length is considered a full length album. And I was like, I just made an album. Oh my God. Like, whoa, that's fucking crazy. And yeah, so that's it all came together at the last minute, and was really just an intuitive flow the whole time. So
Dude,
yeah.
that's an awesome story. And if you had to say just what your top lesson that you learned from you and your creative process, like through making this album, and
Mhm.
if you have a couple that you're already like sure of, like please don't let me limit you to one. But what do you
Yeah.
think is like the biggest lesson from this journey?
The biggest one would be, and I think this is a through line in so many parts of, my life and other people's lives, is to really just do it. And I know that that's easier said than done, but like the terror of doing something that you're like, the momentary fear of doing something that is, uncertain, and I don't know how it's going to be received. And granted, I don't get any negative feedback at this point, because I don't think I'm in a position for people to go like, man, you've changed, like this fucking sucks, like I'm only getting either no feedback or positive feedback at this point. So whatever stories I made up in my head about, are people going to like it, and are people going to think I'm cool or whatever, like it's all this facade kind of getting in the way of that. And if you really connect to it, it's some sort of like resistance, and succumbing to resistance is succumbing to insecurity, and not listening to that, like that God force within you that's like, I'm here to do what I'm going to do, and I'm not afraid to die, and I'm going to do it whether or not people enjoy it. Like that willpower it doesn't care about what people thought about you when you were in high school, or it doesn't care about how people are going to receive your work in the world. It's like having the courage to put something out there regardless of, the feedback, and knowing that it came from that truest part of yourself. Like that's so much more important than being like, oh, did my album get a good review on, pitchfork.com? It's like, who gives a shit? It's like, people are going to say whatever they're going to say. And for the most part, I'm willing to bet that, for people listening, and for most people out there, you're going to get so little negative feedback if what you're doing is coming from a good place, that it's actually, it's baffling to me how much I got stuck in my head about what people were going to think of it. Like I legitimately thought I was going to be made fun of, like out loud. People were going to go like, aha, this is terrible, like you're you're so goofy and stupid, how dare you try to do this. And that's, I mean, if that's someone's private thought, I have not heard it, so to me it doesn't exist. And it's like, it it's really, yeah, it's just really funny how we get stuck in those places. And so yeah, I think that would be the primary thing that I learned, where you take the leap, and then you realize there was nothing to even avoid on your way down, and you landed softly and effortlessly, and you were like, wow, the ground on the other side of the cliff is safe, there's nothing to worry about. There's a great Terrence McKenna quote that is, it's like, courage is jumping into the abyss to find that the abyss is a feather bed, or something like that. And it's I just completely butchered that, but something along the lines of,
Yeah, but we get the idea. And
yeah, jumping into the abyss and realizing that it's a feather bed, and just being like, wow, it's actually totally fine here, and it always is. Like we're so resilient, and we transform so quickly as humans, that no matter what situation you find yourself in, based on completing a creative project, or creating a new job for yourself, or starting a new relationship, or whatever big moment that we're like, oh my god, I can't do it, this is so nuts. whatever that thing is on the other side of that, like it's always okay. Like
And I
it's,
feel like that is well paired with what you said about as long as it comes from a good intention,
yeah.
you're good on the other side. Because I really feel like for me, whenever I've like created something out of like, oh, well, I'm just going to make this to make money,
Uh-huh.
nobody bought it.
Yep.
And whenever I
Yeah.
just made something because I was feeling it or whatever, like that's the stuff that people are always like, wow, like that really spoke to me or whatnot.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah.
definitely think that another super good key is create out of a good intention.
Mhm.
And when in
Yeah.
doubt, create out of love, right?
Yeah. And that's ultimately, it feels like where everything creative comes from is it's either an abundance of love or a lack of love. And I think that I fluctuate between those two places. I've had some people comment, that know me and my, daily existence, and they've said, it's really interesting that you make really beautiful things whenever you're going through like a tough time, and then you make super aggressive, crazy shit whenever you're feeling good about life. And the song I just put out today, that's coming out soon, is batshit crazy, and I feel like I'm in a great place right now. So it's very odd that that's like the dichotomy at play. And yeah, and I think that it's coming from, like, it's, for me at least, like the projects and the songs, like they're coming from something that like needs to be filled, and if you're able through what you're doing to fill that place within yourself, then no one can tell you anything about what you're doing that's going to make you feel any different. So, I fully intend on, speaking my truth throughout my career, and, voicing what I feel is right, and putting in my music what I feel is coming from, like deep within me. And it has, a resonance with me, and it feels aligned, whether it's, coming from a place of love, or it's coming from a place of pain or fear or something like that. I know in my core where it came from. So if someone interprets it in a way that they, I'm sure there's going to be a song in the future or an interview or something like that, or, something where my words or my creation is twisted in a way and people get mad about it. And like no one can, I'm sure that will be a scary experience when it happens, and my body, like my animal body, will go, oh my god, danger, nothing's safe. But if I really sit with that moment and feel into it and say, yeah, you know what, like I know where that came from, and I know how purely how I did my best to purely express that. So what you're saying is your interpretation, that's your thing. I know where it came from in me, I know what I meant, this is exactly what I meant. If you go into it with that understanding, you can see that's exactly what I meant. And whatever experience you're having, that's your experience. And so knowing that, no matter, like, that would be the worst case scenario, that like, you know I got canceled or something, you know what I mean, like people freaked out and tried to, stop me from existing. That's like the worst thing that could happen. And knowing that even in that situation, it's going to be okay, and because it already is okay, then that helps dissolve a lot of that fear and that resistance. Because I, at this current moment, I'm not exposed to enough people for them to even be mad at me about anything. Like there's not I feel like there's a critical mass of people where then, people feel like they have the permission to be angry. But whenever you're like, if you go on, someone's YouTube channel and they have like 8 views, there's not a bunch of people there going like, fuck you, dude. Like, because they know that
There's
they're,
only 8 of you guys. I can Google you. I can
yeah,
find you. I can come and talk to you in person.
yeah. And like, they know that their negativity is going to stand out, so they don't feel safe to do that. But then if there's millions of comments on a thing, or, someone has millions of followers, they don't think twice about saying like, well, fuck you, man, in that sea of people. So they feel safe to. And my point with that is that, like, I made up stories about nothing, like a thing that's actually an impossibility in the current situation that I'm in. And I still was like, people are going to get mad at me. I don't know. And it's really funny what things will make up to prevent us from doing the thing that we're here to do.
And we tend to be our own worst enemy. Like the stories
Yeah,
up in our heads, half of the time at least, are worse than what anybody else is actually gonna have the courage to do or whatever.
yeah, exactly. And so, at the end of the day, it feels like if I can be an example for people just to go out there and do it, then that's beautiful, because like it took so many people around me that had done something like that to go, dude, just do it. Like, come on, I promise you it's safe. And like, we all give each other permission to do the things that we're afraid to do and do the things that we're called to do. And so, if releasing an album and going through that process of, finalizing it and adding some, like finality to the equation was what I needed to do for myself and for other people, then that's beautiful. That's the best thing that I could possibly ask from that experience.
And you are inspiring and you are empowering people to create. I had the honor to be part of one of your video making classes.
Mm-hmm.
And that was such a good experience for me personally. I went in just kind of like really needing some advice on how to make a video that I literally had to have done the following week. And I did it. It was awesome. I felt super confident after that. So thank you for doing that. And I know you're planning on doing that again. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So I'm going to continue to offer kind of like, Q&A things. And I think the next one's going to be more structured, and it'll be less of, I'll open it up for people that have questions at the end and, pick a couple and see what happens. But I found that it seemed like everybody on the call was resonating more when I just like knew what I was talking about and had something to provide you guys with, instead of being like, hey, what's happening? Do you like you want to talk about this one very specific thing right now? And like we talked about at the beginning, when you're talking, you're helping people with a creative process, they will distill it down to, well, I don't know what thing to use, and I don't know what to do. I don't know how to make this title in this video, or I don't know how to make this sound good or whatever. And they'll make it about these little mechanical things, when most of the time at the core it's like some internal block that's preventing them from finding that way. I just experienced that today with a project that I was working on. I was like, oh my god, why do I feel so stuck? This is stupid. And then I sat with it and did my best to release that feeling. And then I was like, oh my goodness, wow, okay, cool, I know exactly what to do. It's not as cut and dry as I would like, but I know what to do now.
So what tools did you use to kind of get yourself over the hump? Do you have like any resources that you normally go to that maybe you can share with us?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. Like, since we are, vibrational, energetic creatures, and we have, like emotions are these pockets or flows of energy throughout our body, and our, physical vehicle is the thing that dictates how we feel in the experience. A lot of times it's physical. It's not necessarily or it's physical or emotional. Like, it's some sort of thing that's stuck in us, that's invisible, that we can't really see. And so for me, it's always about moving energy. It's always about, like, I find that if I work out, or I go get sunlight, or I stretch in the backyard, or we used to have a cold plunge, like an ice freezer that would have freezing water in it, close to 32 degrees. That is like the best chalkboard eraser for your mind and emotions and stuff. It just, like, nothing else matters when you're in there, because your body is like, we're dying, and you have to help your body be comfortable in such a stressful situation. So yeah, really like finding a way to move energy through yourself, or, you know, reset yourself. It could be a cold shower. It could be, you know, doing 30 push-ups in the sunlight, or, you know, doing some sort of breath work, like whatever it is, like something that changes your state essentially. And a really powerful one that I use often is this stuff called hape. Have you ever heard of it before?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
So I actually have some right here. So this is I'm doing this live from our meditation room, and it has all of our tools and stuff for healing and maintaining your spirit. And so this is called a caripe, and this is a little applicator. And you take this powder that looks like that. I don't want to spill it, but that's it's tobacco powder. It's like dried ground tobacco that's in this really fine powder, mixed with, you know, other different plants and sometimes ashes and different things. And it's made by these indigenous tribes in the Amazon. And it's for, you know, medicinal, energetic, emotional healing. And when you have it, you fill up a little bit in here and you blow it into your nose, into both nostrils. And it's like getting hit by like a missile from the spirit realm. It's like this huge blast of this clearing. It feels like it clears everything out in your body. And that's the intention, is for it to, you know, almost like an Etch-a-Sketch.
Does it
When
feel kind of like a high dose of nicotine?
there's definitely a buzz that comes from it. I use quite a lot of snus tobacco. It's a little like pouches, so I'm used to having a lot of nicotine in my system. So there's not as much of a like buzz in that way for me, but it can, you know, really, you know, give you a huge like, yeah, like a really big
Like
nicotine
you got a
buzz.
lightning bolt in your butt.
Yeah, exactly. And the cool thing about it is it's used ceremonially, and I find that the stronger the intention that you put into it, like the more you sit with it, you can like hold it against your heart and like really breathe into what you're trying to experience. And you know, you can set a prayer with it. You can ask for something in particular, and then you do it on both sides, you know, an equal amount on each side. And it completely clears out your emotions, your energy, like anything that's stuck. It's a lot of people use it as like a physical healing tool, because a lot of physical ailments are on an energetic or emotional level. And so, you know, people talk about, you know, chronic diseases that they've had for a long time that was some sort of, you know, psychosomatic emotional thing, being healed by simply clearing and restoring their energetic and emotional bodies. And so while that might sound a little woo woo for a lot of people, I found it to be true in my experience. And it seems like that's usually where I find myself stuck, is in the emotional or energetic realm, as opposed to, you know, the physical or mental realm, if that makes sense.
It's hard to actually be stuck physically anywhere unless you're in an elevator. But I
For
think
sure.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
you definitely make a great point with a lot of your tools from your tool belt to kind of like push the reset button when you hit the wall of resistance is have your rituals, you know,
Mhm.
whether it's hape, cacao,
Mhm.
matcha. Like, I mean, you can honestly ritualize anything.
Yep.
And I think that what gives that the power is, like you said, setting the intention
Mhm.
and just like thinking about the vibe that you want to put yourself in.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, that's 100% the case. And the really cool thing, that I've started to get more and more in touch with, is that like everything is sacred. You know, like everything. I wish I had thought of that before I sat down record this and do this with you. Because I could have really made this, before I even opened up Zoom, like a really like sacred, intentional thing. And I don't think that I showed up poorly to it by any means. But adding that extra bit of like, and I love that you asked to take a few breaths before we started, and like those things matter, before every meal. My fiance and I and anyone else that joins us for dinner at the house, we close our eyes, we all hold hands, we take a bunch of breaths together, and if there's anything that needs to be said, it's said. If there's some sort of, sometimes there's nothing, but if there's a acknowledgement of how dope the community is, or how much we love each other, how grateful we are for the food, whatever it is, it completely changes the way you experience life by approaching things in that sacred manner. And you could go as far, I don't know if this would be worth your time and energy, but it might. But it could go as far as pumping gas is a ceremony for you, where you like are very intentional and present with every single thing. And it's not to micromanage your whole life and become obsessed with everything, but just to really like allow yourself to not be distracted and like just feel into the flow. And the times that I remember to do that, times that I remember like, okay, going to Whole Foods is, it's a sacred thing. I'm going in to find the things that will fuel my body in the best way, that I'm going to enjoy eating and that are going to nourish me in this way. When you leave, like it feels like a completely different thing than when you're rushing around and just grabbing things randomly, and you get to the checkout and you're like, $200, what the fuck? Like, it's like that. It's completely different.
They don't call it whole paycheck for no reason.
Exactly. And so, yeah, I find that with work and creativity, that is a huge portion of it is, and that's actually a huge portion of the course that I'm in the middle of building, is that you finding your center and finding that like place of stability where you really feel like you have, some internal power and, like an internal foundation of where you are. That changes. Like I notice for creating music or editing videos, if I go outside and just like put my feet on the earth and like absorb some sunlight and take some breaths and get some fresh air before I start working, it dramatically changes how that session goes, rather than just plopping down at the computer first thing in the morning, hastily drinking my coffee and chugging away. Like it's a different experience. And so I try my best to do that myself as often as I can, and to teach others and share that with others, that's a very important component to this dance we're doing.
And such a beautiful one, because with those, like by doing those little extra things, we're really just like beautifying our lives.
Yeah. And it changes the game. And then also the primary thing that I find my music is good for is dancing. And so if anyone is interested in some music that is meant to move your energy around, I would check that out. And if it becomes a part of your clearing ritual for yourself, and you find that one of those songs or another song by a different artist in particular really helps you shake out whatever's trapped in your body and whatever you're feeling, and helps reset you so that you can work or create or just love your life better, then I highly recommend that. That helps. That's one that I didn't mention. That's one of my favorites, is just going into this room actually and putting on loud music and just shaking it the fuck out and just letting all that stuff go. I might actually do that tonight. That sounds great.
It's always a good time to blast some music and either shake it off, or I also do love sometimes just like blasting music and like sitting there like with my eyes closed listening to it, because I feel like I'm always like pick up things that I wouldn't if I had my eyes open, because apparently that's how I hear, is with my eyes.
Well, that makes sense. Your brain is receiving less information, and I have the same experience. There was a stretch where I was doing like a ton of ketamine like all the time. I've stopped since then. It's it's been a good thing to not do an infinite amount of ketamine, but I was doing just a ton of a ton of ketamine, and I would listen to my songs and I would close my eyes and just go like this and just like, yeah, that feels good. And like it felt like I was getting more information. And then when it came to the application of actually making the changes, I wasn't as good at in that state. So I realized it was a great tool to review things, but it wasn't a great tool for creating things, if that makes sense, because you could hear it from a different perspective. And I'm not recommending by any means to start doing a ton of ketamine. It's an endless rabbit hole. You don't want to go there. So
Yeah, but I think, we all do experience with different like altered states of consciousness and substances.
yeah,
I've had very similar experiences with like marijuana. I'm like, yes, no, like I can really tap into my art if I'm like
yep,
really high. But the thing
yep,
is, like, then the translation of like me getting lost in like these vision states to actually physically doing things, it's hard.
yeah,
So that's why you really got to find what works for you. And you can do that by really experimenting with yourself safely, safely
for
and
sure.
slowly, step by step. But definitely by experimenting, you find your flavor of the sauce. And
Yeah, I was just going to say, so that I'm glad you used that word because I was thinking as you were saying that, I was like, I agree, but if you if you can't create sober, you haven't cultivated your sauce. It doesn't mean that you don't have it, but it means that like I find it really interesting when people are like, yeah, I have to get, not drunk, but a little buzzed before I write because, Ernest Hemingway did it. And I was like, that's interesting because I feel like if you really had the thing, it would be an addition. And so, I mean, I think that, using things as a crutch is definitely possible in that realm. And I'm certainly guilty of that too.
And something
But
else we can
yeah.
use as a crutch, and a lot of artists do that. I know I hella have because I used to be literally, this is gonna sound stupid, but addicted to grief. My mom died when I was 17, so I really think that just made like a huge impression of me. So I, for a long time, felt like I couldn't make big decisions unless I was kind of like in this really like in this grief space, where I
Mhm.
was like, yes, this is the ending of something. I can put myself in grief and that way get like the courage to make the next decision.
Ooh, thank you. Thank you. That's huge just for me personally. For, anyone else, that's wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and a lot of us are addicted to emotions because they're just neurochemicals. Like if I take a line of cocaine, that's dopamine, and I can get dopamine by like doing a CrossFit workout.
hmm
So many ways to
Yeah.
do that. So good to
Yeah.
be mindful of everything and how it really affects us or helps us.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's all here for us to explore and figure out. But there's all kinds of sticky traps all over the place, especially with emotions. I'm glad you brought that up because being addicted to emotions I mean, that's like basically everybody's life essentially, is we're all addicted to some sort of emotional state. And then we disguise it as, oh, this is my life. This is what I do in the world. And it's like, it's feels like, and I'm talking to myself mostly because you helped me see how much I love, or I guess a wounded part of me really loves chaos and things falling apart, because then I'm like, aha, I can solve this. I will act and I will make this happen. And I find that the more I heal, the more I stabilize. So that's beautiful.
Brother, thank you so much for being here, for sharing so much of yourself with us. I will make sure to link all your social medias, your creative company, your Spotify. Also, he has amazing playlists, so definitely check out his Spotify. His music is
Yeah.
amazing and all of his playlists are just so good.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I honestly I get more out of, so we had a thank you for having me first of all, and for asking so I can talk, and this helps me, and I hope that this helps you and all the other people listening, because I mean, that's ultimately what we're here for. So thank you. But I do love hearing that the playlists are good more than like the music that I create for some reason sometimes. And
No, that's good too. Don't get me
yeah,
wrong.
no. The thing that was really interesting to me was we had an album launch party, and all these people are dancing around, and it's this really like close knit kind of, I mean, it was like an ecstatic dance ceremony in an interesting way. And then there was like the after party playlist, and it was almost more satisfying that everybody was unanimously like, what's the after party playlist? I need this right now. And so I made it and put it up for everybody. Because yeah, it's cool. Like sharing music is like you're sharing a little piece of you, and it's so beautiful. And so I love doing that. And so it's, yeah, definitely check out the playlists. They're great. And the Spice Nebula is that's the EDM, that's the bangers playlist. That's where all the spicy beats are.
That's where I go every day whenever I need to shake it off.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Me too. We're probably listening to it simultaneously.
It's a vibe, dude. It's a
Yep,
vibe.
sure is.
Any last words, resources that you're just like, you know what, I'm super passionate about this book or that thing? Anything you're super into right now you want to share with y'all before we go?
Yeah. What seems like a big theme of this has been resistance. And so if you want to take a more like logical and like useful look at resistance, I would suggest either The War of Art or The Artist's Journey by Stephen Pressfield. Those are two amazing books that really helped me. And I would say The Artist's Journey is a better book. The War of Art is more like a thing it's really short, and it's like tiny, tiny little chapters. It's one of those like wisdom books that just has like little, poignant, or not poignant, like potent things throughout. And it's beautiful. And, it's one of those like standard artist books. But I think The Artist's Journey is a way better a way deeper dive into things. So I would suggest that on the more like logical, tactical field of conquering resistance. But if you want to get super weird and read one of the best books I've ever read in my entire life that I cannot stop talking about, it's more in the spiritual, almost religious in a way, or not religious, but like, it's really hard to explain, but in the more spiritual, kind of out there realm, but still very much grounded in reality. It's called Dispelling Wetiko. That's Wetiko by Paul Levy, I want to say. Yeah, I'm going to go with Paul Levy. But that is about what the force of resistance, like what the collective, internal and external, like or individual and collective force of evil is in the world. And it is wild. And it's basically, he distills it down to this thing that exists in all of us that is essentially this necessary force of resistance for humanity to get its shit together on an individual and collective level. And if that strikes your fancy and piques your interest, I cannot recommend it more. It's incredible. But it's a wormhole, and it will, if you're open to it, it will reveal a lot of parts of yourself that you might not want to look at. So, buyer beware on that one.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
definitely going to check that out, because you had me at like the collective unconscious. So definitely will do that.
It's nuts. I mean, the parallels he's drawing between, different gods from different cultures and different words that we use for different things, and how it relates to, our path as an individual and collective organism. It's so good. It's so good. And I got everybody close to me reading it. It was a random Amazon suggestion. I just saw it and was like, yeah, why not? And then just completely changed my life. And
synchronicity.
Yep. Yeah, that's how it works. So yeah, Dispelling Wetico and The Artist's Journey. Those are the two I recommend.
Okay, thank you for recommending that. I'll make sure to link those in the show notes. Thank you so much for doing what you do and doing it how you do it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for seeing me in that way, and know that I feel the same about you. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you, and I hope you have a good night. Thank you.
I will. I'm about to go eat some good food.
Oh, man. It's going to
Yep.
be a good night indeed.
Uh-huh.
Peace out, brother.
Yep. Be well.
Thank you.